Hello.
Hello anh Được.
Oh hey, Mr. Trung.
Hi, chào chú Được.
Anh. Chào anh.
Anh chào em. Khỏe không?
Em khỏe anh. Vẫn khỏe. Uống cà phê lúc nào cũng khỏe.
Uống cà phê khỏe. Ngày uống được
Em
7 ly
chào.
không?
Dạ.
Ngày uống được 7 ly không?
Có, uống ý cho giá bây giờ cũng đắt rồi. Thôi để uống ý chứ.
Đúng giờ đấy em ơi.
Dạ vâng. Vâng, kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, hội thảo hôm nay chúng ta sẽ được tổ chức bằng hình thức online.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a webinar to ensure that we have no background sound. So please mute your equipment and you will only unmute when you speak or when you ask questions. And now please turn off the webcam in order to ensure the smooth connection. If you want to speak, please press the hand icon, and then for interpretation, you can choose the language by clicking onto the globe sign, and then you can choose either English or Vietnamese. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the GCP, I would like to send our best regards to all of you. Wish you good health and happiness. To the sustainable purchase. It is an approach by GCP. This approach includes the three parts. First of all, the code, and then the EM, the equivalent mechanism, and then the reporting on sustainable coffee purchases. Today, GCP will introduce this approach toward the sustainable coffee purchases and introduce about the equivalent mechanism, the EM. EM has been updated after the public consultation to meet the needs of the users shared by the famous mechanism. We also have the application to show that the growth in sustainable coffee purchases from the 8 leading retailers around the world. The 2021 report is the approach of transparency and competitiveness of the companies to solve the sustainability issues. This report will provide the important information about the sustainable coffee purchases of Mega Group, Coriander Pepper, Nestle, and other coffee roasters and coffee manufacturers. All the above companies committed to share the sustainable supply and comparable supply. And through the webinar, you can understand about the sustainable coffee purchases and to identify, to understand more about the GCP and the EM toward the sustainable development of the coffee industry. Participate in our webinar today. I would like to introduce Mr. Đức, Deputy Director of the Department of Crop Department and of Math, and Miss Welka Buntrano, Miss Caroline Groka, Mr. Phạm Quang Trung, representative of GCP Vietnam, Mr. Đỗ Thành Trung, Director of the GCP. Now I would like to introduce the full participation of all the central and local representatives who are working on sustainability and certificates of imports nationwide, cooperatives and NGOs in this area. We are thankful for your participation on our webinar today. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to present the antitrust agreement. I would like to take into notice about the bindings of the antitrust agreement. There will be no discussion we need to be mindful of the constraint in antitrust laws. There shall be no discussion or agreement or concerted actions that may restrain competition. This prohibition includes discussion of current or future prices, margin discounts, the timing of price purchase changes, costs, capabilities, customers, suppliers, products and market plans, sales projections, credit terms, or other competitively sensitive information related to your business. We must not talk about the agreements to fix prices, control sales, or the output of production, allocate markets, or refusing to deal with a particular entity. The discussion or exchange on these topics must not be avoided during this meeting, but also during all the informal gatherings when competitors may be present. Now, we will have the welcoming remarks and then the overview of the GCP 2.0 strategy and towards sustainable sourcing approach, and presentation on the equivalent mechanism 2.0, presentation on sustainable coffee purchase snapshot 2021, and then the panel discussion, then the Q&A, and then the concluding remarks. We expect to have 90 minutes of the webinar. Now, I would like to invite Madame Welka Buitrago to provide the welcoming remarks.
Thank you for this introduction and for these words. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of GCP, the Global Coffee Platform, I would like to welcome you to this webinar on the GCP equivalence mechanism and sustainable coffee purchases reporting. As you may know, GCP is a membership association that includes members from all the segments of the coffee value chain, from farmers, traders, roasters, and retailers, and also actors of the civil society. What is quite unique about GCP is that it has the mission to advance sustainability. And GCP also works with a network of country platforms in coffee producing countries that strive to address the most critical sustainability challenges. We're really pleased and honored to have the opportunity to have a more, if you like, intimate conversation with the stakeholders in Vietnam. GCP has launched a new strategy, and as part of this strategy, we have a goal for 2030 to achieve transformational change for more than 1 million farmers. And we want to share with you how these tools that have been mentioned already actually contribute to this goal. In September, we launched the 3rd edition of the GCP report on sustainable coffee purchases. And a couple of weeks ago, we launched the revised equivalence mechanism. And those were global events. We're really now very pleased to be able to have the opportunity to have a more in-depth conversation with the Vietnamese stakeholders, so we can also hear from you what you think about these tools, and we can all together then use them and improve them as we continue their implementation. So we may think why these tools are important to be discussed now. And I think what is quite evident from what is happening in the world and the challenges that we're facing as a society is that individual actions are not enough and are not going to bring us the speed that we need for change. GCP believes that sustainability is a shared responsibility, and these tools are a reflection move together towards a more sustainable world. So we're really excited to have this conversation. The team in Vietnam in particular has made great efforts to ensure that we have different voices in this discussion. You will have the opportunity to hear from technical point of view, but also from different voices. And we hope that we have a lively conversation where we can dive into these tools and see how we can then improve them and use them for the benefit of the sector. Thank you so much.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bài phát biểu chào mừng của bà Welka, và xin cảm ơn bà và chúc bà gia đình mạnh khỏe và hạnh phúc. Thì tiếp theo chương trình thì xin trân trọng kính mời ông Lê Văn Đức.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Lê Văn Đức, Deputy Director of the Department of Crops Plantation to deliver the opening remarks.
Trân trọng cảm ơn ban tổ
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the organizers to provide me with the opportunity to speak, and welcome all of you to the very important webinar of GCP. And we are well aware of the coffee industry in Vietnam. The area of coffee Vietnam is around 710,000 hectares, and the production of annual is around 1.8 million tons of coffee. So it's around 16.5% of the world production, coffee production. And in 2021, we exported to Europe, Northern American of around 53% and 42% to other Asian countries, mostly Japan, Korea, and some other countries. We highly appreciate it as the sector that integrates globally, intensively, among other agricultural products in Vietnam. And we also see that Vietnam also the important provider for coffee around the world, in the world market. With that knowledge in mind, recently, the Vietnamese government has the guideline for development of sustainable coffee. Since 2014, we developed the scheme for development of sustainable coffee, including an important objective which is to apply the processes of sustainable coffee production, accounting for 80% of the area of coffee plantation, and then scheme for cultivation of coffee, and the scheme on coffee specialty in order to change the variety to suit the market. And it is an important criteria for sustainable development in the quality of coffee. For cultivation, Vietnam is paying interest to this area. First of all, we developed the process of coffee recultivation for localities to apply. This process will enable the farmers and businesses to include the new varieties and crops with less risks and with more efficient. And then we develop the process of green production so that we can protect the environment of the coffee area. In combination, we coordinate with the World Bank to develop the model for the coffee landscape to preserve and conserve the forests and then the water resources and the contents related on ecosystem and culture related to production areas. For sustainable development of coffee, we develop the process of cultivating and safe watering, and then the plant covering for coffee so that it is safe for production. Regarding the quality certification, Vietnam is encouraging the international organization to invest in Vietnam. We have developed the VietGap for coffee, and we encourage the application of 4C, 4TED, and 4TES in Vietnam. Other certificates, 60% of the area have been certified with quality. Regarding with the production organization, we have a program for new rural development. This is an extensive program for all the provinces and brands. Coffee is one of the very significant brand for production. We pay attention to developing the cooperatives and business connection. And in 2018, we have 64 in the law on crops, cultivation products, or cheese. We piloted in Duy Ninh, Lâm Đồng for coffee, and now we are guiding the locality to develop the cultivation area code, how to manage and for CO and to reduce the risks during production. Regarding the infrastructure for effective sustainable development, the Vietnam government aim to move to the short-term crops like rice, paddy rice, and corn. Each year, we export 6 million tons of rice, and then we focus on the irrigation, especially the big construction work for the long-term trees, the perennial trees. And then we also developed and ensure the coverage of forests. Now we can maintain the coverage of 43% of forests. Around the world is around 26% only for the forest coverage. So I think this contribute to the development of sustainable coffee. So toward the sustainable coffee production in the culture, in ESG, now we have a webinar toward the sustainable outsourcing. This is very important content, and it suits the general guidelines of the Ministry of Agriculture and other localities producing coffee. And our webinar today will support the certifying agencies because they cannot cover everything in the coffee sector. The contents related to the guidelines for sustainable outsourcing. Later on, we will be certified, and then the assessment of the equivalence. This is a very important transition for producers to produce the coffee with quality, safe coffee with added value. And if the market needs, we will certify the quality. And we see that today we highly appreciate the businesses to support our initiative and to participate and discuss so that we have solutions to include this initiative to the coffee sector. Once again, I do hope that you will have the participatory manner and all the comments, all your valuable comment in the discussion so that we can have more sustainable development of the coffee sector. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The opening remarks of Mr. Lê Văn Đức. Thank you and wish you good health and success. Now I would like to invite Madam Welcome Wigaro from GCP to present on the strategy and then the approach toward the sustainable coffee outsourcing.
Thank you.
Xin cảm ơn lời giới thiệu của ông.
Thank you so much. So, as mentioned in the welcoming remarks, I would like to start saying how this connects to the goal of
đối với các mục tiêu của GCP. GCP hiện nay có mục tiêu tới năm 2030 để có thể có sự thay đổi, để chúng ta có thể có hơn 1 triệu những người trồng cà phê. Và để hiện thực hóa điều này thì chúng tôi sẽ thực hiện cái chiến lược của chúng tôi ở cấp độ quốc tế, ở cấp độ toàn cầu. Chúng tôi sẽ thúc đẩy thu mua cà phê và đồng thời chúng tôi thúc đẩy nhu cầu.
There's some problem with the interpretation. It's okay right now, right? Yes. Okay, no, it's good right now.
Can you please, Gaika, please repeat a bit? Can you repeat?
So, yeah. I was mentioning that GCP has a new goal. This goal is to achieve a transformational change for more than 1 million farmers by 2030. And how GCP is going to do that, we work at 2 levels. We work at a global level and we work at the country level. This approach where we have the equivalence mechanism and collective reporting belong to the global level. With this approach, what we want to do is promote baseline practices of sustainability and at the same time promote the demand for that coffee, that we encourage then roasters and retailers to source coffee that has been following these baseline practices. So on the left side of this slide, you see all the different tools that want to do that want to promote the uptake and the demand of this coffee. In this session today, we're going to be diving into 2 of these different tools. I'll mention also a couple of other words on the other tools, but we have the focus today on the equivalence mechanism and the collective reporting. If you go to the next slide, you will see that these are very connected. We're going to unpack this in this conversation, but basically the code, the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, I'm going to explain what it is connected to the equivalence mechanism, and the equivalence mechanism is connected to the snapshot. All these tools are aligned, and there's a circle of also of continuous improvement, and these tools have been developed also taking into consideration how they can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. You see in the slide on the bottom, the SDGs that actually, to which this work contributes to.
Em vào Zalo, em vào Zalo, gửi cho anh Zalo.
Yes, so if we go to the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, what this is a common language for baseline sustainability. We're not starting from zero, we're basically building on the work that so many other organizations and GCP itself has done in terms of sustainability, and we have refreshed this, this code. So we published this, a revised version of the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. We also had a similar session with Vietnamese stakeholders to revise this code. And what is also really important about this code is that this code has been informed by the national sustainability curricula of different countries, like the one in Vietnam. And it was also not only informed by it for its development, but now the code, whenever we revise, and the team in Vietnam has done that, the national sustainability curricula now, when they are revised, they also consider, so what is changing in terms of sustainability? Are there any changes in terms of these baseline practices that we want to promote the uptake and the demand? We have seen now that there are topics like deforestation and living income, human rights that are much more at the forefront than perhaps a couple of years. And this code has different uses for different users. If you go to the next slide, you will see examples of how this code can be used. This code could be, for example, a reference for coffee producers, so they see the practices that they implement at the moment, and they see how they change, how they are themselves compared to these practices. The same for managers of groups. And traders, for example, they can also see where they're sourcing from and have an idea how those farmers then compare against these baseline practices of sustainability. The same for governments that are involved in coffee landscape approaches. They could have a look within their sustainability landscape models, how these sustainable practices then compare. Financial institutions and donor agencies can actually use this framework to say, okay, so we want to promote sustainable production. We're going to ensure that the projects or the investments that we do actually have considered these practices too. On the bottom of the page, you see also that this is the part that is connected to the equivalence mechanism, which is basically when there are schemes that are developed, and by schemes, I mean, it could be certification schemes that have already been mentioned, but it could be programs developed by private actors. It could be programs developed by the government or civil society. So those schemes, they can use the code to see how they compare to them. And that's the focus of the equivalence mechanism that I'm going to mention in a minute. And last but not least, the governments in coffee producing countries can also use this code to develop and to build further their own extension materials. So if we have a look at the code, you see that it has a set of principles and practices. We have 12 principles that are organized in terms of the economic, social, and that is of what has been considered sustainability. There's nothing that was not there before, but there are changes in the emphasis or in the scope. So for example, climate is a topic that is much more now in the forefront, and climate mitigation and adaptation were not so considered important before. So now it has a more prominent role. So this is just to mention gave you a bit of a feeling of what kind of changes took place in the last revision of the code. So now I mentioned that then one of the uses of this code is for schemes to know if they could be considered equivalent to the code. That's the focus of the next slides. If we go to the next one, I would like to share a couple of words about the evolution, about the purpose and the partnership with ITC. So if a scheme, if you go to the next one, please. What is the equivalence mechanism? So we have seen the code. The code says this common language about principles and practices about sustainability. If a scheme would like to see if they're equivalent to this code, we have developed what we call the equivalence mechanism. So this is basically a framework. If you want, it's like some lenses to have a look at the scheme and to assess if they can be considered equivalent to the code. How we have developed this equivalence mechanism? In the next slide, you will see the evolution. So we started with the launch of the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code because it's like the milestone, the starting point. Then we did some research in end of last year, beginning of this year. We developed a draft and we engaged in a consultation. So it was a public consultation, and from some of the names that I saw of participants of this meeting, some of you participated in this consultation. We developed a final draft that was then approved by the board in July, and now we are in the implementation. The implementation is the publication of the code and also bringing this revised code, the publication of the equivalence mechanism and bringing this equivalence mechanism to the sector. This process was approved by the board of GCP, but it was accompanied by a technical committee and an advisory task force that at all these different steps of the process of development of the equivalence mechanism gave us guidance and gave us support and gave us challenges to have the best tool that we could offer to the sector. So the equivalence mechanism has a couple of principles that I think are important to consider. First is that we wanted to ensure that approaches and innovations, in particular those that recognize different starting points, were able to be considered in this framework. We wanted also to push forward transparency to ensure that there's credibility about baseline acceptable practices. And we also wanted to ensure that the leadership of some schemes is recognized. So in particular, we're quite keen to not dilute the value of certification. We also wanted to ensure that this equivalence mechanism offered a level playing field. So what recognizing that there are approaches that are different, that there's a common entry point and to start the sustainability journey, and that there's a baseline as of which we can consider that coffee can be considered responsible or sourced sustainably. Continuous improvement, it's key. We know that we have advanced, and Vietnam is an example of that, so much in terms of sustainability, but there's still so much to do. So not only in Vietnam, but in other countries, we wanted to really put forward the topic of continuous improvement as a key element of this equivalence mechanism. And we want to offer something to the sector that is credible, that it enjoys the credibility of all the different actors in the supply chain. So now we say that we have this framework to have a look at these schemes. So what does that mean? So it means, and Chundo is going to give much more details about this, but I just want to mention that is not only that a scheme considers the what. So what are the principles and practices that are included, but also the how. So how are those practices, if we're talking about good agricultural practices, use of pesticides, those practices are in a particular scheme, but how they are produced, how they are implemented. So this includes topics like governance, like standard setting, assurance, data, and claims. And as I said, I won't mention details here because I know my colleague Shundo is going to elaborate on this. So I just want to, if we go to the next slide, I just want to give you a flavor of actually what changed from the previous version of the equivalence mechanism, because it's not new, to this version. So we have streamlined all the requirements. We have provided more guidance and examples. In particular, so private schemes actually can better understand what are the expectations in terms of the operational criteria. We have, in some cases, also added the rationale. So why is a particular requirement important? And last but not least, we have also added requirements in terms of what the schemes need to be to make public to the world on their websites about the different schemes. To be able to support the equivalence mechanism, we have developed different resources that you will see on the next slide. So this, the document is available in English and it's available in Vietnamese and Portuguese too. Some other versions will be coming soon in other languages. Then we have a glossary, annexes, we have the summary of the consultation, main changes document compared to the previous version, and we have a document with frequently asked questions. We also have a contact form on our website for those schemes that are interested in going through the process, they can also do it. So I want to say a couple of words about the implementation because it's something also that is changing, and is that for the implementation of the equivalence mechanism, we are going to be working with ITC. ITC is a UN agency that has a lot of experience in benchmarking tools and has support similar processes with other sectors and with other organizations. We believe that our collaboration with the ITC, which is the International Trade Center, is going to support the scalability of the work and at the same time ensuring the credibility and the neutrality of the process. And before I give the floor to my colleague Chundo, I would like to mention what those schemes need to do if they're interested in going through this process, in knowing if their scheme can be considered equivalent to the code. So there are 3 phases. One is application, then an assessment, and then a reporting to GCP. The application is managed by GCP, and basically we check there the eligibility criteria. Then we go to an assessment part, that is what we are outsourcing to ITC, where they check what I mentioned before in terms of if the scheme has the sustainability criteria included and the operational criteria. Then they issue a recommendation and GCP makes a decision. Here you see, and you see here the connection with the report on sustainable coffee purchases, that if a scheme is recognized as equivalent to the code, then it becomes eligible to be included in this report. Then a third step is that every year, then the scheme will need to share some metrics with GCP so that we can also track progress and coverage of the schemes that are under the equivalence mechanism. I would like now to invite my colleague Chundo to give a much more detailed outlook on this, and I'm happy to join the conversation once we have the Q&A. Thank you.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn phần trình bày về cái chiến lược GCP 2.0 của bà Welka.
So I would like to Mr. Đỗ Thành Trung to provide the EM 2.0. Thank you for your introduction. I would like to introduce about the key contents of the EM 2.0. My presentation includes the four parts. What is the equivalent? What are the criteria? What is the equivalent process? And then what is equivalent? What are the criteria? The equivalence refers to the recognition of schemes that include at least the defined equivalent criteria and their required minimum compliance level. It means that the scheme may be more comprehensive than the coffee as a whole. Less all the practices reflect a minimum baseline threshold of sustainable, but they support different sustainability outcomes depending on how they are implemented in practice. We have expectation for the scheme, but the way we implement will produce different results. That's why the EM look at the 2 criteria of performance, sustainability, and operations, the way we need to implement in order to achieve our goal. In this slide, we will explain a bit. In English, there are different terms for this. For example, program, scheme, or system. But when we translate into Vietnamese, we use the word chương trình. The translation for scheme. Miss Caroline will show you about the various schemes so that we can have a more clear concept. So what is a scheme? They include, a scheme includes the voluntary sustainability standard or systems, the initiatives, programs, national curricula, the company sustainability program, company sourcing requirements, among others. Overview of the EM 2.0 criteria. Ms. Gorka presented to you already, but I would like to repeat because this is a primary importance, a prime important. First of all, it is a sustainability criteria. These are the requirements for a program that want to be certified. And then we have the operational criteria, how to organize and operate so that we can achieve the sustainability criteria. For the sustainability criteria, we look at them from the 3 dimensions: economics, social, and environmental, including the 12 specific principles and 5 critical practices. For operational criteria, they include the governance criteria, the 4 standard setting criteria, 10 assurance criteria, 6 data criteria, and 4 claim criteria. So, which scheme can be considered equivalence? Continuous improvement approaches, which specify the principles and practices in the Coffee SR Code as a minimum practice, require time-bound action plan up to 3 years and monitoring of progress. The M&E. Also, the schemes which measure and report on actual outcomes of specific criteria. When a principle is not applicable with justification, we can consider them as an EM, but there will only be rare exceptions to this. For example, if they get 4.9 over 5, we can take into account. This must be documented and accepted by the GCP Secretariat. Any cases that are not certified as equivalent, it means there's no mention of any individual baseline practices because it is not in a scheme's objectives or scope. For example, there's no requirement on workers because the scheme focuses on environmental aspects. In other words, not covered, that's not equal, not applicable. For exceptions, see the previous point. Now I would like to share with you the 5 critical practices. Except for the 4 critical practices, the Coffee SR Code also highlights the exclusion of the 4 critical practices and the inclusion of a 5th critical practice, which is continuous improvement. Exclusion practices, elimination of the worst form of child labor, elimination of forced labor, no deforestation, no use of prohibited pesticides, They are recognized hotspots by the sector in terms of severity and critical in terms of the immediacy of impacts if not addressed. If the practices are found, they are to be stopped immediately. The fifth critical practice, continuous improvement, recognize that sustainability is a journey and that some issues have broader root causes. Acceptable as equivalent when there are continuous improvement approaches which explicitly specify the inclusion of the above-mentioned four critical practices. In case of a violation, an immediate time-bound plan with a system for verifying follow-up is required. We can see the operational requirements, assurance or remediation. Which scheme is not accepted as equivalent? The schemes which do not specify exclusion of all or any single one of these four critical practices, or which only recommend, it means do not require, that these critical practices are eliminated. So the practices must be eliminated. For the detail on the actual coffee SR code principles, practices, and expected results, please see the latest version of the sustainability criteria in the coffee SR code, or you can find it in the chat box. For the governance, there are three criteria. Due to the time constraint, I would like you to read carefully in your handout or in the document. The scheme owner governance ensure an inclusive, transparent system for accountability, coherence, and effectiveness in its decision and operation. The second criterion is related to standard setting. There are four criteria. The SO develops the sustainability criteria that are relevant, transparent, and that reflect a balance of stakeholders' interests. They are the four or the sub-four criteria. Regarding the assurance, there are 10 criteria. They are quite long. I will only brief them, the very key criteria. The SO has a documented methodology for assessing the compliance with its sustainability criteria so that the supply chain partners, investors, and other stakeholders know that they can trust the results of the assessments as being accurate, consistent, rigorous, and accessible. Regarding the data criteria, there are 6. You should refer to your material. For example, I mentioned about the accuracy for monitoring the improvements of the scheme. The data is used as a learning tool to be accountable to stakeholders about the added value of the scheme. For claims, there are 4 criteria. The SO manages the data to ensure it is relevant and accurate for monitoring the performance of the scheme. The data is used as a learning tool and to be accountable to stakeholders about the added value of the scheme. Which type of coffee will be registered for accreditation or certification. Regarding the equivalent process, Yanka just shared with you earlier, there are 3 steps: application, assessment of sustainability, and reporting to GCP, and then finally approved. Yanka just shared with you that in order to ensure the quality, the equivalent process uses the best practices for benchmarking. For example, the ISEAL Sustainability Benchmarking Good Practices Guide and builds on existing credible mechanisms. For example, the accredited ISO 17065, the ISEAL Code Compliance Membership. The process considers the alternative to ensure the credibility, transparency, independence, and sustainability, the cost effectiveness. This includes a partnership with the UNITC as the independent verifier, leveraging the standards map. Overview of the steps in the equivalence process. In her presentation, Gelka shared with us the steps already. For example, the application, and then the self-assessment, initial review, the review and close gaps, the finalized assessment, recognition, reporting to GCP. The recognition includes an official communication to the scheme owner, publication on GCP website, and inclusion for GCP collective reporting on sustainable coffee purchases. Caroline will share more with you in her presentation about this. And then the complaints about the results of the equivalent process and or recognition status of schemes can be submitted following the complaints and appeals procedures. You can see in Annex 1. Next, please. Here are the application steps. I will be very brief on the eligibility criteria. GCP members put forward the secretariat scheme, the scheme which they propose to be recognized. The scheme owners do not necessarily need to be a GCP members to have their scheme recognized. They can be non-member or they can be foreigners. The scheme owner is a legal entity. The scheme has been operational for at least 12 months. The scheme has developed and implemented for its sustainability and operational criteria in at least 10 large farms. If the SOs allows for group assessment in at least 3 groups. Next slide, please. And then the reporting to GCP, the GCP recognition of a scheme as equivalent to the coffee SR code is for 3 years. The deadline to report to GCP is March 31st of a year for data related to the previous calendar year. The scheme owners are required to confirm to GCP each year if there are no changes or report changes in their schemes. We mean the changes in the sustainability requirements or operational criteria. The scheme owner of a GCP recognized scheme, it is required to inform the GCP secretariat in writing about any significant change. Claims about CP recognition. GCP will maintain on the GCP website the list of recognized schemes and include all recognized schemes for GCP collective reporting on sustainable coffee purchases. During the application process, the scheme needs to select. The scheme owner can make reference to its scheme supporting GCP's mission and vision. The scheme owner can make can only make claims about the GCP recognition together with the level of assurance after the approved EM 0.2 assessment and others. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The brief about the EM 042 from Mr. Chung, I would like to invite Miss Caroline to present on the Sustainability Report 2021.
Yeah, thank you very much. You already had quite a lot of information. Let me take you through the next bit. So first, if you go to the next slide, please. I'd like to just remind ourselves, and you've seen this slide before, how these tools are working together that we have developed for the sector. So Jelka has mentioned a little bit on the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, which is the foundations for using the equivalence mechanism together with a scheme being recognized then. Based on the recognized schemes, then we invite roasters and retailers to report on their sustainable coffee purchases, which results in the snapshot on sustainable coffee purchases. All this contributing to the sustainability development goals. You've heard a little bit about the code. You heard a lot about the equivalence mechanism. I'll take you through the reporting right now. Next slide, please. So depending on the assurance model of the schemes, they are either third party or second party schemes equivalent to the baseline coffee code before, and then in future to the coffee sustainability code as it evolved. We currently have 5 schemes as third party equivalent, which you see in the top row, and then a further 9 in the bottom, which are second party second party equivalent, which makes a total of 14 schemes that can be reported on. And congratulations, continuously new schemes apply, and there are more in the pipeline. So that is an encouraging development. Next slide, please. So here we see how the reporting has evolved and who is reporting. It started in 2018 with 5 roasters, which you see here: JDE Peet's, Nestle, Melita, Strauss Coffee, and a Spanish roaster, Supra Café. And then Tesco joined in 1920, whereas the others continued, of course. And then for last year's reporting, we had a total of 8, including Keurig, Dr. Pepper, and Westrock, who came forward and decided to report as well. We are welcoming and encouraging additional roasters and retailers to join, especially the ICO London Declaration signatories, for the reporting that starts then beginning of next year on this year. Next slide, please. Here I will show you a little bit of the results from last year, which these 8 companies reported a total of 2.2 million metric tons, of which 55%, 1.2 million metric tons, were sustainable coffee purchases in line with the coffee SR code and the equivalence mechanism. That is an increase of 29%, but we have to bear in mind there were also additional 2 roasters who contributed to that increase. In the next slide, we will see a few more details how this evolved over time, the reporting. And in 2000, in part, that 35% of the total volumes reported were sustainable. And if we move then and looking at 2021, this was already more than half, 55% actually, of the total volumes reported. You can also see that in 2019, the third-party schemes, the second-party schemes are, with a very light part, are starting to show up. And in 2022, 21, they were a total share of third-party schemes of 23% and the second-party schemes of 6%. So reporting on sustainable coffee purchases is one way of advancing coffee sustainability, but of course not the only. All these companies who are reporting have additional programs and wider strategies in place, which you can find a essence in a paragraph in the snapshot. For more information, please look there. In the next slide, we see we invited, can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. We invited on a voluntary basis the roasters and retailers to show the regional breakup. And we have designed here 4 regions, which is Latin America, excluding Brazil, Africa, you see in the light blue bit, Brazil and Vietnam, and Asia Pacific without Vietnam. We've taken out Brazil and Vietnam because they are the largest producers, and also regarding sourcing the countries, and in order to get a clearer picture on how the regions are split up, we combined those two. And you see that for some companies, there is a clear focus in terms of region where they focus on. I'd like to emphasize, and this takes me to the next slide, that GCP fosters origin diversity. And you see here as Vietnam, and then followed by Brazil, Colombia, and Honduras, are the origins where most sustainable coffee purchases have come from. Again, please bear in mind that we're looking here at the numbers of the 8 roasters and retailers who have reported. In 2018, there were 25 origins reported on, which increased to 2021 to 33. So that is good news. It's a bigger diversity, sorry. But if we look at the 10 top countries, what strikes us here is that we do not find any African origins. They are in the list, but they are much further down. So this should keep us on our toes, because it is important, of course, to increase coffee purchases from a broad range of origins to contribute to social, economic, environmental development. But we also need to see that it comes from a diversity of origins to foster that development. Yeah, increasing sustainable coffee purchases is one side. Of course, we also need to see that we increase the demand side, so that these two work very closely and neatly together. Next slide, please. Yeah, so please join us. I'd like to invite you, if you are a roaster or retailer in this call, to participate in the 2022 collective reporting. Here, the members, the roasters and retailers collectively come together to show their transparency and advancement on sustainable coffee purchases. I'm inviting here the ICO London as declaration signatories, but also national brand roasters, private label roasters, and coffee retailers. How does it work? We can have a look in the next slide, please. Let's talk, get in touch. The next step would be signing a non-disclosure agreement. We're talking about data here, so it's managed and their security. And in the third step, the reporting then starts on the volumes of 2022. This would be in the first quarter of next year happening. Start the conversation with us, please. You can either contact my colleague Chung in Vietnam, who will be ready to take your inquiry forward, or myself, if you're interested in reporting. Thank you very much. Yeah, and sorry, and last but not least, I'd like to thank our reporting partners, the roasters here mentioned on the slide. Thank you.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn phần trình bày của bà Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to 3 short presentations. First, an introduction of CV2.0 strategy. Second, the purchase mechanism, and then the equivalence mechanism. We would like to listen to the sharing from yourself or any comments that you may have. First, I would like to invite Mr. Được, Sustainability Director of LDC Group. We have a question for you as follows. According to you, the equivalence mechanism and snapshot has which role to your company in promoting the awareness and capacity to address the challenges in sustainable coffee production? Thank you, Mr. Thông, and thank you, GCP, as well as our partners, the traders, or the capacity building institutions in Vietnam, as well as in other countries. I can say that LDC is a member of GCP for a long time, and LDC wants to accompany GCP to address the challenges in agriculture as well as in various products, including coffee. We have implemented very specifically the LDC Global. We have a sustainability strategy. So one of the 4 pillars of our sustainability strategy is responsible coffee. And in our coffee responsible coffee component, we have very specific contents. For example, we want to make sure that by 2027, 80% of the coffee purchased by us are responsible coffee. And by 2025, we will not purchase coffee from deforested areas. So not just coffee, but also the other commodities as well. We will apply such strategy. We have been using the equivalence mechanism and GCP code as a baseline to develop our responsible coffee scheme. And we're also very happy that this scheme or this program, according to LCD, has 2 types, the advanced and the core. And these 2 have been consulted with buyers like Nestle, some others, and we get a high consensus from them. So we have a target that by 4th quarter 2022, we'll be able to get consensus for all our partners, so that the GCP Code of Conduct will be a baseline for us to develop our responsible coffee scheme according to our strategy. To implement this scheme, I think that LDC and all its partners, as well as the central and local agencies in Vietnam, should join hands with us, as well as join hands with other companies. So one of the contents of the GCP Code of Conduct, as well as the equivalence mechanism, as well as one of the requirements of buyers from Europe, is that no product from deforested areas. So these days, it is a very burning issue. Previously, or 3 years ago, we talked a lot about glyphosate, but now we are talking about a product from like deforestation-free products. So that's why I think that we have the GCP standards now are quite in line with many other international standards or code of conducts. So the opportunity is for other companies, apart from LDC, to use this code or to use the equivalence mechanism to develop their own sustainability scheme is very high. And on this occasion, I'd like to thank GCP for being so active in collaborating with LDC and our partners to organize so many activities so that we can implement well this code through project activities, through specific support, through training for farmers or for local partners. So that's some of my saying. Thank you, GCP. Thank you, Mr. Được, for your comments. Director, Sustainability Director of LDC. Okay, now I would like to invite Mr. Đỗ Ngọc Sĩ, Sustainability Director of Asia Pacific region of you know, according to you, our step how can it help you? So Mr. Sĩ from JDE, please. Mr. Thông, do you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. First, I'd like to thank you very much. I'm sorry that today I have another meeting. I'm on business trip. That's why I was not in this event from the beginning. I just like log in this Zoom. And sorry that I cannot open my video because there are so many people around me. I have just like see the last slide of Caroline. And I see that I'm very happy to see that the statistics of Vietnam are the highest. I would like to thank to congratulate to GCP for your efforts in bringing such statistics to Vietnam. And I would also feel very honored to see that the volume of the sustainably procured coffee amount in Vietnam is the highest in the world. Sorry that as I'm on business trip, that's why I do not have opportunities to participate in all the activities organized by GCP. So I asked some of my colleagues in JDE, and you know that according to our global strategy, 100% of our coffee must be responsible coffee. And I asked if we accept or if we recognize the coffee which are procured through the equivalence mechanism at the moment or not. But however, my colleagues could not provide me with very precise answers. Now we know that some NGOs are also applying the equivalence mechanism. And later on, who or which organization, like which NGOs, we know them NGOs implementing many basis code of conduct. So we know that when before they develop such code of conduct, they have consulted a lot of other codes of conducts or other standards. And I wonder later on which organizations would be the ones to accredit and how frequency How frequent should it be? And for JD, we don't have to ask the suppliers to what kind of documents we should ask our suppliers to show to us. Oh, thank you, Mr. Sis, for your question. I would like to ask Caroline to answer this question on what kind of documents JDE should ask their suppliers to show them. Okay, sorry, Mr. Thông, I would like to continue with my comments before Caroline provide the answers to my question. Regarding the benefits, we will not have to talk about it anymore because everyone are clear about it. So far, we have been implementing our accreditation programs, but only with the small farms, household, the small farming households. However, I think that maybe in the future, we may extend the scope. And I know that the companies are the one who understands quite well the mechanisms as well as actors. All actors involved, they also understand the challenges, the advantages of themselves, so they can produce some improvements for themselves or for their practice. That is my first comment. My second comment is that I am sure the people will have more opportunities to engage in this program. For example, when they engage in the program, they can improve their socio-economic status or their environmental conditions. So far, we said that when people participate in this program, they will have a lot of opportunities to improve their livelihood or their living environment. They can apply good agricultural practices, which will bring added values to them. So those are my two comments. And I am now looking forward to the answer to my question. Okay, thank you, Mr. C from JDI. And now I would like to invite Caroline to answer Mr. C's question.
If I may, can I please answer the question?
Được.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you for this question. I think it also gives me the opportunity to make a clarification, and it is that the equivalence mechanism is not a certification scheme. So this is not a new certification scheme that is perhaps similar to those that actually are quite well established in the sector. So what we wanted to do with this approach is to be able to have a framework that could see, okay, from the certification schemes, which one could be considered equivalent to the code, but also from to be more inclusive and see from the private schemes that are already in the sector, but also for the new ones that come, which of them could be also considered equivalent to the code. So if you want, then we have a much more broader perspective to have a look at sustainability that of course considers also or encompasses certification approaches, but goes much more beyond that. So a company could not be eligible, let's say, to go under the equivalence mechanism because we are not a scheme that is working directly with farmers. We basically work with the schemes. So in terms of the schemes from the certification wall that we have recognized as equivalent, you have for C, you have for trade, you have Rainforest Alliance. So those wouldn't need to actually, those schemes and have the certifications, they somehow follow these practices that we're putting forward, and there's no need for them to basically engage with us. Basically, we engage more at the scheme level and not at the farmer level. I hope that clarifies your question, see?
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. It's clear. Oh, thank you, Gekha, for your answer. Mr. C, do you want to have any feedback? Oh, I see that Mr. Chung from GCP raising his hand. Wow, I would like to have some additions apart from what Geikha has just said. Yeah, so regarding the duration of the GCP's accreditation, it is 3 years. Oh, I have no further comments, Mr. Thông. Okay, thank you, Mr. C. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that Mr. Dũng, Sustainability Director of Civico, present here today. I wonder if you have any comments or questions after you listen to the 3 presentations, and does your company has any plan to collaborate with GCP to implement equivalence mechanism as well as sustainable purchase? Good afternoon, Mr. Thông. Hello, everyone. So, after I listened to the 3 presentations of the speakers, I understand better about the equivalence mechanism. As far as I remember, in 2011, or from 2011 to 2014, if a unit gets the RA accreditation, 4C will accept, will acknowledge that that whole production areas. So I think that the GCP equivalence mechanism now is similar to the 4C previously. That is my understanding about this equivalence mechanism. So, however, I wonder if the roster can purchase the equivalence mechanism. I know that we have some rosters here. So, you know that in Vietnam, many units have different accreditations. Yeah. So, in Vietnam, we have a quite high volume of sustainably procured or sustainably purchased coffee. So if we have this equivalence mechanism of GCP, I wonder if the volume of sustainably purchased coffee in Vietnam will be increased. Because like some already follow the 4C, so maybe the others will move to the GCP mechanism. So we also have to look at the needs of the rosters. So nowadays, Nestle, Lavazza, GDE, JDE, etc., they all have a strategy that from 2025 to 2030, they will increase the volume of their responsibly purchased coffee. So I wonder if the equivalence mechanism will contribute to increasing the volume of sustainably purchased coffee. Thank you, Mr. Dũng, for sharing your comments. In this workshop, we also have Ms. Dương from IDH. So, Ms. Dương, do you have any comments or questions? First, I would like to congratulate GCP for organizing this very meaningful workshop, and you have very clear and comprehensive equivalent mechanism support so many stakeholders. As you know, IDH, the thiểu, and at the moment we are supporting companies so that they can fulfill their sustainability commitments in sustainable purchase. And I would like to know the collaboration between public and private sectors or other socio-political organizations in the implementation of this equivalence mechanism or in the snapshot reporting mechanism. Moreover, I also see that the GCP snapshot provides a very comprehensive picture of the sustainable purchase. However, I wonder if we can identify any sustainability issues that should be prioritized. So once you have the data, once you have the reported data, can you prioritize issues so that you can develop a joint plan of actions, not just during the supply chains, but also for the other stakeholders, like for socio-political organizations or for some other stakeholders, especially for systematic issues that can be addressed in the supply chain only, for example, deforestation or over-abuse of pesticides. So from IDH, I would like to receive more information from GCP. Thank you, Ms. Dương from IDH. Your first question should be answered by Gokha, and Gelkha should answer the first question, and then Caroline should answer the second question.
Thank you. I would like to reflect on the question from the person from IDH. I think it's a great question because it shows also how this can connect at a country level. No, so far we have talked about the global level, roasters, international roaster reporting, schemes that work at a global level or at local. Just to share an experience that, for example, in Brazil, the implementation of their curricula that is aligned with the previous version of the code, through the implementation of that tool, then they also gather information about where the gaps were larger. So from these principles and baseline practices, where are we most behind? And this has triggered then a collective action on topics like social well-being and pesticides. So it's a really nice then use case in terms of how the code is not, the code or the equivalence mechanism or the snapshot are not an end in itself, but it's a tool to continue advancing in terms of sustainability. So one thing is, and it's fantastic, we have a global language that is recognized, accepted by the industry about baseline sustainability. Then roasters have targets and they're reporting, we're measuring all this in the same way so we can all be accountable as a sector. But then as we implement then this code and the national sustainability curricula, then the countries have a better insight on where action is needed to address the most pressing sustainability challenges. So it has happened in other countries. In Vietnam also, there's quite some work that IDH is doing and many others in terms of solving this issue. But I believe that as we move forward in the implementation of these tools, then that we're going to have much more rich information to make evidence-based, let's say, programs to address the most pressing sustainability challenges. And maybe I would like to then refer to the question from I think, from Simesco, which is basically in terms of if the roasters and retailers are going to then be buying more. So definitely what we want to do with the snapshot is bring awareness about how much the progress is taking place, so that there's more scrutiny, there's more transparency, and we hope that this is also an incentive for the roasters to buy more, and for other roasters to join then the journey in sustainability in terms of making commitments and having a framework to measure how we advance commitments in terms of procurement from schemes that can be considered to the code and therefore apply these baseline practices of sustainability at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Gelkha, for your answers. Caroline, do you have any additions apart from what Gelkha has just said? Caroline, any further comments?
Yeah, maybe not much. I think Gelkha has covered it. It's using also the code is and Gelkha has mentioned that it's closely linked to the national sustainability curriculum, yeah, and that is being used by the public and the private extension services. So that also drives sustainability. But you are quite right to mention, you know, if we drive the production side, and this is what I have mentioned as well, that we also need to see that we drive the demand side, yeah? So we're encouraging, again here, more roasters and retailers to come forward and have formal and submit formal commitments of their sustainable sourcing goals. Coming forward with these goals means also, of course, they want to fulfill them. And for that, they will need a big, diverse coffee origins, but also qualities, yeah? So we're not only talking about, you know, sustainable coffee, it also needs different qualities. So I think that's an important point as well. Thank you.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bà Caroline. Vâng, có lẽ là xin mời ông Phạm.
Thank you, Caroline. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Chung to give some further additional information about Vietnam. Okay, thank you, Mr. Thông. And Mr. Dung's questions is very interesting because it is related to Vietnam. That's why I would like to provide some additional information. As Caroline and Galka have just introduced the principles as well as the application globally as well as in Vietnam, we can see what should be done in each country. And you know, it is closely linked to the activities already done by IDH and GCP over the last time. And we will continue to collaborate with each other. For example, in relation to the NDC for the coffee, we will continue to add more good practices in the coffee sector so that our capacity building activities or our training will become like more practical for farmers, for other stakeholders, so that they can meet the sustainability criteria. So in the coming time, according to our plan for GCP Vietnam for the next 5 years, we will try to achieve this objective. And for sure, after this workshop, GCP Vietnam and IDH will continue to have further discussions to see what activities we can continue to collaborate with each other, with focus on big purchase areas operated, which have operations of IDH. And I hope that these tools we have today will help address all the issues that we have identified. For sure, we should not be too ambitious that we cannot address things overnight. However, step by step, if we identify the issues and we take the steps one by one, we will gradually remove all of them. GCP has a plan to raise this issue in the meeting of the Vietnam coffee industry coming, because we know that we alone cannot address this. We need the hands from many other stakeholders. Thank you, Mr. Chung, for your addition. I also see that we have Ms. Châu from Biện Cooperative in this event. So Ms. Châu, do you have any questions? Hello, everyone. I am Châu from Biện Cooperative. After I listened to the presentations, especially the one on snapshot, I have some concern. If my cooperative engaged in the equivalence mechanism and in snapshot reporting, I wonder what benefits this mechanism will bring to us. And what about the other stakeholders like the farmers, the local governments? Will they have any benefits from this mechanism? Thank you, Ms. Châu, for your questions. I would like to invite Galka.
Yes, it's a key question. No, it's, I think, if not the most important question about how then farmers benefit from all this work. So I think there are many benefits in terms of there's harmonization in the sector taking place. There's already a proliferation of schemes that is taking place, and then farmers need to go left and right to try to comply with all the different schemes, either from certifications or for the private sector. This approach helps to harmonize. We have heard from LDC that they took the GCP equivalence mechanism and the coffee SR code to develop their own scheme. So there's a harmonization of schemes that is taking place, so that each of the schemes is in any case going to have their own unique attributions and where they want to deliver impact, but at least the bases are going to be the same. And I would hope that then that also reflects in less burden on farmers to be able to comply with different set of schemes. But the long-term goal is that we are able to promote much more demand of this kind of coffee that has been produced following baseline practices of sustainability, at least, and that there are benefits in terms of the prices that the farmers receive. We're not there yet, but definitely that's also how we want to link also this work to this transformational goal that I mentioned in the beginning. And of course, many of the practices that are included in the code are practices that strive for increased productivity, for farmer well-being, for conservation of nature. So that also has benefits in terms of a better management of the farm, better working conditions, better quality of coffees, that all that then contributes also to farmer well-being. Thank you.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bà.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bà Welka.
Thank you, Welka, very much for your answer. Okay, we have listened to the comments and questions from the farmers for the companies. There's a question sent to Caroline, which is, what is the plan for 2022, and in the future, will there be a snapshot report for Vietnam? What is the recognition for 2022? And then in the future, is there a snapshot report for Vietnam?
Yeah, if I take that. So the snapshot, if I may remind, is on sustainable coffee purchases by roasters and retailers. And in the snapshot, the one chart I have shown is where we also show the volumes that have been purchased from Vietnam. But there is not a report that we have only from Vietnam. You also saw that the regional reporting includes Brazil and Vietnam. So as we move along in years, maybe we come, and we hope, to more transparency even, but that takes a little bit of time, yeah? And also encouragement to roasters and retailers. But that would be really a good next steps to understand figures even better. But as such, the snapshot now covers all the origins where sustainable coffees have been purchased from. I hope that answers the question.
Cảm ơn bà Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline, for your answer. So everyone, due to the time limit of the event, you cannot have a further discussion. If you have any further questions, please send them to our email. Now I would like to invite Mr. Chung to make the closing remarks. Thank you, Mr. Thông. So I would like to thank all the participants for spending your time to participate in this virtual event. It is, I know, not easy. So the COVID-19 is over, and we normally have an in-person meeting. However, today we are very happy that we have so many participants in this virtual event. This is a very good opportunity so that we can share and disseminate to all the coffee stakeholders on a new approach towards sustainable coffee purchase. As we said, it includes three main tools: the coffee sustainability reference code, the equivalence mechanism, and the snapshot report. So through this, GCP will recognize the sustainable coffee production schemes. So whether, and also recognize the sustainable coffee produced and purchased and reported to GCP. We hope to collaborate more closely with all of you so that we can develop a more sustainable and more prosperous coffee sector. If you need any kind of information relating to the reference code or the equivalence mechanism or the snapshot reporting, feel free to contact us. All these contents have been shared in the chat box, so you can click the link in the chat box so that you can see the website of GCP and download all the documents that you are interested in. If you are unable to download the documents, feel free to contact us and we will share these documents with you. Once again, on behalf of GCP, I would like to say thanks to all of you for spending your time on this event, and we hope that we have a better collaboration in the future for a sustainable and prosperous coffee sector in Vietnam and brings the better benefits for coffee farmers in Vietnam and globally. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Ladies and gentlemen, in order for us to improve our future event, could you please spend some time clicking on the link on the chat box to do an evaluation of this event. Thank you very much.
Vâng, xin mời các quý vị chúng ta bớt một giây để chúng ta đánh vào cái đánh giá xã hội đảo.
So everyone just spend 1 minute to complete this evaluation form.
Chúng ta bật hết webcam lên để chúng ta có thể là chụp ảnh.
And then everyone please turn on your camera so that we can have a group photo together.
Anh Lê Văn Đức, anh Phạm Quang Trung, chúng ta bật webcam lên ạ.
Mr. Đức and Mr. Chung, please turn on your camera.
Chị Nhung,
có mình bật rồi nhưng mà bên đấy vẫn giữ và bên đấy là tắt rồi.
Dạ.
Chụp cái kiểu ảnh chưa?
Vâng. Một lần nữa xin chân thành cảm ơn tất cả.
Once again, I would like to thank you all very much for your full participation in this event. Goodbye for now and see you again.
Bye everyone.
Thank you. Xin cảm ơn tất cả.
Xin chào.
Xin chào mọi người ạ.